A brother from a long lost mother
Well,
somewhere.
I mean, our hairstyles might be a testament.
Hey,
Perhaps it would be. We're a bit streamlined here. Here we
keep it
go.
clean and
I,
it's natural too,
I'm
right?
just going to 3, 2, 1 countdown and off we go, Jim. So I'm not
All
going to
right,
mess
sounds
around here.
good.
All right, you ready?
Sounds good.
3, 2, and 1.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Oh, greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our goal is to inspire you, to empower you to live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here sharing insights and wisdom with you. I deeply appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us on this journey of growth, exploration, and audacity. Now, imagine a gardener nurturing a diverse garden. Each plant represents a unique individual, each with its own strengths, weaknesses, and needs. Just as a gardener must cultivate emotional intelligence to understand the very needs of each plant, leaders must harness emotional intelligence to connect with their team members. Resilience is akin to the roots that dig deep into the soil, providing stability during the storms. In leadership, being resilient allows us to navigate challenges and bounce back stronger. Just like a gardener thrives against the odds. In the thriving environment, mistakes should not be seen as failures, but as a stepping stones to success. Leaders play a crucial role in fostering a culture where members feel safe to take risks and learn from their missteps. By embracing mistakes as valuable learning opportunities, organizations can cultivate innovation and creativity, ultimately leading to growth and development. As leaders, it's essential to create meaningful work environments where individuals can truly thrive. This involves understanding each person's unique contributions and ensuring they feel valued and connected to the organization's mission. There's no question that when people find meaning in their work, they're more engaged and motivated, leading to higher productivity and satisfaction. Trust and connection, another two big things that are important because they're cornerstones of effective leadership, and shared experience foster these bonds. When leaders demonstrate vulnerability, they create a safe space for others to do the same, paving a way to deeper connections and authentic relationship. Now, in today's episode, we're going to explore these important themes with our guest. I'm totally thrilled to welcome Jim Bouchard to the show. Jim is a renowned leadership expert, author, and speaker, as well as the founder of human-centric leadership movement with a unique background that includes overcoming personal challenges. Jim brings a wealth of experience and insight to the world of leadership and personal transformation. Jim's journey from adversity to leadership excellence makes him an incredibly relevant guest to today's discussion. He embodies the principles of emotional intelligence and resilience, and his passion for creating meaningful work environments aligns perfectly with our episode. And plus, he's an all-around great guy. You can absolutely love him, and he's a lot of fun. And again, he cares about his work, and I really appreciate Jim. So without any further ado, let's jump into our conversation. Enjoy. Hey, Jim, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
I'm feeling pretty audacious today.
You are, my friend. You absolutely are. You're audacious.
Yeah.
You're streamlined like me. We're
There
ready
you
to
go.
go, right?
Clean, keep it clean.
I love it.
But
I
this
love
is a
it.
natural. Is yours a natural? Because
That's it. Yeah, a
to
little
the
bit.
young guys now, they do it on purpose, right? And
Yeah.
I always
That's
tease them.
it.
I said,
That's
no,
it. That's
I
it.
earned this one.
I love it. Now, look, we were having a ton of fun before we pressed record. I mean, I wish our audience had an opportunity to hear some of that conversation. And I remember I said, stop, let's press record before we get into any kind of stuff. Let's kind of go. And we're talking about AI, right? And so maybe we can start there. And I know leadership is a big part of the work that you do, and inspiring people to be better leaders. And I gotta tell you, leadership, next to being audacious, that's the topic all day, leadership is probably one of my favorite things to talk about because of the ability it has to profoundly impact other people. I think there's a former U.S. president that said, if your actions can inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, or become more, you are a leader. And so that says that any one of us has that leadership potential inside of us. And so we'll get there. But we were talking about AI, and I thought it was really cool because I was just sharing that that AI, while there's a fear that AI can replace a human experience and cause us not to think and use our minds and be less creative. It's just the exact opposite, isn't it?
It can be, and it's funny because, that strikes at the heart of our whole theme about keep it human, right? The struggle with these tools, I'd argue this is probably the most disruptive one we've seen in our lifetime, but, human beings have been through these disruptive cycles
Sure.
before, right? And we've got to decide what to do with it. We've got to decide how to preserve our humanity. But is it taking our humanity away? I don't know. I mean, I've had some pretty good conversations with ChatGPT. And I was just about to tell you about one where a few months ago, I actually asked it because a lot of the leaders I work with are concerned, is AI going to replace leaders, replace managers? And I said, well, it might replace managers. That's a different subject. We can get into that. But as far as leadership goes, AI responded back, ChatGPT responded back. And by the way, do you say thank you to it? I do all the time.
Oh, do you? I've never thought of that, actually.
Yeah, it gives me a good response. I say, hey, thanks a lot. It says, oh, I'm glad to help, But at any rate, yeah, it's scary, isn't it? Yeah, it said no, it can't replace leaders. And you know what the reason was?
Why is that?
It can't accept responsibility. Isn't that wild? It told me it can't accept responsibility for anything that it shares with us. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be a powerful tool. But we do have to really discipline ourselves and work hard to preserve our humanity, particularly because this is going to put some people out of work.
Sure.
It already is, and leaders have to face that every day. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with displacing people from what they do every day? So. Yeah, I don't have the answers. It's just
No.
I'm out there, try to instigate people to explore the problem because we've got to think about it now. Yeah.
Well, and I think part of it is finding different ways of thinking, right, and different ways of doing things. And I think through that process of changing your mindset, it'll kind of get you closer to the answer. I don't know what the answer is either. I'm not suggesting I have the answer, but it does start with that change. And also to going back to a really emphasis on people and their individual skills. Right. I think the skills conversation is an important one. Sometimes individuals tie themselves to the job that they do, but those aren't their skills. The things that they take with them every single day of their lives, whether it's professional or in their personal, they're portable skills. And so I think those two things would be part of the conversation. I don't have the answer either, but I'm just throwing that out there.
No, but I'm glad there's a couple things that you just said that really stimulated a lot of thinking. One of them, of course, is the transference of skills. I mean, believe me, a few years ago, I didn't think I'd be doing this work. I'm not qualified to do this work anyway. I'm a former drug addict and a dropout. I mean, what right do I have to be talking about leadership, right? But it's partly because of the transformation, and to translate these skills. I mean, and then a few years ago, after my drug experience, I spent most of my life getting punched in the face and dressing up in pajamas and chasing kids around. Now that doesn't sound good unless you've been in a martial arts dojo and you know what I'm talking about, right? So, but at any rate, and the other thing, it speaks to the whole theme of your show, and part of the reason I was attracted to your show, that the idea of audacity, right? Yeah. It's not about being comfortable. It's not about, the status quo. It's about having the courage, right? And I strongly believe courage is not the absence of fear. The absence of fear is stupidity. Huh? So, to have the courage to face the unknown, to face these things that we're uncertain about, and do the best we can with them. I mean, isn't that part of what life? Isn't that most of what life is supposed to?
It is. I would say that's the human experience, right? And it's Martin Luther King Jr. has a quote talking about taking that step in that staircase without knowing where the stairs are going, right? And so that courage and that boldness, that audacity to take that step forward and just trust in yourself. Yeah. That's really all that you've got. And so I think that's a really big part of that, and that can be applied to all sorts of lenses, whether you're with a leadership scope or in your personal life or your professional. And so I think it's really, really important that people are just mindful that even when you, I try to simplify things. And so if I were to start something brand new, never done it before, right? I think we can agree there's one or two options. I'm either successful or I'm not, right? Those are the two options. Well, if I'm successful, that's great. Like, who's going to fight? Who's going to, spit back at success? You got what you wanted. Great.
Yeah.
The other option is you're not successful. So let's explore that again.
Well, the other option is you don't do anything, right?
yeah, no. Well, this is it too. And I'm not even including that in the equation because it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
these are the two. Like if you take action, right? So if you take
yeah,
action, what happens? And so if you're not successful, you just learn how not to do it. You learn what
yeah.
doesn't work. You have a better indication of what you can do better. You now have this new experience. You have these new insights and perspectives that you didn't have before you tried. So
Yes.
there is great value in that. And I truly think that a mistake isn't a true mistake unless you walk away from the experience without the
Mm.
lesson.
We've
That's when you made a
we've
mistake.
taught too many people, younger people, to be afraid of these words, failure, mistake, all these things.
Mm,
It's terrible. When I was boxing, it was right. I had this trainer. He was such a cool guy. He was like a Yoda kind of guy from the street, but he was very wise. He had always had a lot
mm.
of very good philosopher. He'd usually say this when our face was all mashed in. He'd say, "Hey, Jim, don't worry about it. You learn more when you lose, right?" Then he'd start to walk away, take a breath. He'd look back. He'd say, "Well, some days you don't feel like learning anything," right?
Yeah.
He captured the whole thing in a nutshell, right? Yeah, there are lessons in mistakes. There are lessons in failure. We have to wring them out. It's hard work, and we've got to return to people embracing that and finding the joy in it because all study any great success, and I'm pretty arrogant about that. I'll talk about audacious. I get in trouble when I'm speaking because I say I can define success absolutely, and we can get into that if you want to.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, have the audacity to go out there and take your lumps because any great success, you talk to anyone who, certainly everyone that I've ever looked up to, when I get to talk to them and understand how they became successful, a lot of failure along the way,
Yeah.
and still more
Absolutely.
failure to face if they're still engaged and they still want to learn and grow.
And what I love about that lots of failure, what that says to me is that they're trying. You're making an
Yeah,
attempt,
yeah,
right? Like that
yeah,
says to me, that screams, this person has tried because they failed so many times.
yeah.
And with those failures, they have, again, the lessons that we talked about earlier. And
Yeah,
so,
you either do it or you
um,
don't. What was it? It's a great line in the Shawshank Redemption, right? Where it says, "Hey, get busy living or get busy dying."
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Jim, I just want to go back and maybe to help inform our audience a little bit about you and the work that you do. Obviously, your leadership is your bread and butter, but you're also an author and a speaker, and you've got the human-centric leadership movement, which you're the founder of. And again, and that's about, again, we sort of alluded to when we had the AI conversation about keeping the human element in what we do.
Mm.
Maybe it's sort of starting point for our listeners to better understand a little about you and your journey. If you can sort of give an insight, so a little bit about that and what got you to the point that you're at now.
Well, sure. The journey. I'll give you the 30-second version, like
Yeah,
I alluded to a few minutes ago. By rights, I should be dead or in jail many times over. So it's a blessing to be here. It's a blessing to share these ideas and meet great people like you. And was in my 20s. I was kind of full time in the music business at the time, believe it or not, and started to, I can't blame my drug experience on the music. It's just that made it very accessible. And then the weaknesses that I had, right, I was able to medicate myself pretty easily and
right.
get through that way. So anyway, yeah, somehow I found my way out of it. That's a pretty long story. But martial arts was part of that trip. That's how I got into martial arts. I tell people all the time, it's easy to quit drugs. Most of us that do it get a lot of practice before we finally make it, right? Talk about failing along the way. But at any rate, you got to find something to substitute, something that, we call in martial arts, we call it discipline, a meaningful and purposeful habit, right? So I had to find that to replace my negative disciplines. And martial
Right.
arts filled the void. I didn't know it was going to turn into a career. So I spent, almost 25 years in the martial arts business. And then I certainly didn't know it was going to turn into speaking and leadership training. Those were all a
Mhm.
series of happy accidents. But people were asking about the martial arts philosophy and asking me to share it and how to apply it in real life, which was cool because most of my masters that I studied with, that was their whole idea. Master Nick Serio, cool guy. He said, in fact, the attainment of a black belt was nothing more than the attainment of a good learning attitude, right? You get the
Oh,
black belt, you learn about how to learn, mostly about yourself. But then you go and you share that with other people, outside the dojo. It's not supposed to be limited to the dojo. So I had good role models along the way. As far as, the leadership goes, like I said, I used to think that was a pretty poor resume for someone working in leadership. I came to realize it was a very useful one because of that transformation. I had to learn how to transform myself from a loser to a leader, from a drug addict to a black belt, and then to sensei. And that's a huge part of what leadership's all about, isn't it? Transformation,
Yeah.
transforming me into we, getting people to work together, unite, behind a common cause. And so who better to talk about transformation than someone who had to learn it in order to survive?
Right.
And so that became a big part. Now, how did that come into how does that coagulate, I guess, into the leadership philosophy? Well, it's pretty simple. People perform at their best when and only when they know their leaders care, their work has meaning, and they have the chance to learn, grow, and develop.
Yes.
And so this kind of evolved out of helping my instructors train, to help other people in the dojo. And particularly those three, people think they're pretty words. They're not just pretty words. People were asking me, instructors were asking me, what does a sensei do specifically? It took a few years, again, I'm shortening the story, it took a few years to arrive at this, but a sensei inspires, sensei empowers, a sensei guides. Isn't that what all effective leaders do, right? Inspire, touch people's hearts, not just their heads, right?
Yeah.
Empower, make sure they have the tools, and that list, when we do workshops, that list can get awful long, right? What they need to succeed. And then guide, be willing to work with people face to face. We could call it mentoring just as easily, right? Yeah. And you don't need a rank. You alluded to this earlier. You don't need a rank or a title or a position of authority to do this. I'd argue that everyone is a leader, whether you realize it or not. What you're doing with it is different, but you are touching people's hearts. You are giving them some of the tools they need, and you are guiding them. What direction you take them in? Well, I work with kids that are locked up too, and some of them are really great leaders, but they might be taking other kids down the wrong path, right?
So where are you taking them, right?
Yeah, and hey, I understand that. So, yeah, there it is in a nutshell. That's the 101 version.
Yeah, no, and that's a great one. I do love the inspire, empower, and guide. What tools are a leader's disposal to do those things? What tools?
Yeah, well, those are the tools. Those are the disciplines, right?
Okay.
That we need to embed into our leadership practice. Like I said, they're not just pretty words. I think you can tell already. I'm not the lollipops and rainbows guy. This is hard work, and it requires looking in the mirror. It requires a lot of introspection. It requires focused self-awareness, genuine self-awareness to look at what I want to do. And again, that reverts back to my martial arts trip. You walk into a dojo, most dojos, there's a wall full of mirrors.
Yep.
It's not to see how pretty we are. It's to expose our mistakes so we get our feedback, right? We can see what we're doing wrong and correct. And well, a leader's greatest mirrors are the people they serve, right? That's the reflection. In fact, I'd argue with every cell in my body that the only meaningful metric of success for a leader is the success of the people they serve. Right? If your people aren't performing at the level you want them to, it's on you. So look in the mirror, and they're going to give you the feedback. So anyway, that's part of it. Now the tools every day. Let's just take one of those. Isolate one of those. Inspire.
Sure.
I think that something probably means a lot to you in your life, right?
Absolutely.
How do you touch people's hearts instead of their heads? Now, when COVID hit, there were a lot of people calling me. There was a lot of challenges going on then. Certainly we faced a lot of them. But people were saying, how do I inspire? How do I get people through this? How do I keep them going? Now, some people confuse it with motivation. We can get into that in a little more detail if you want later. But the big thing was, get to people's hearts. So I was asking, I don't know. None of us have faced this before. I don't know. So I started asking the leaders that were called, what are you doing? Just what are you doing? One woman, it was so cool because she was looking for some grand inspirational speech to give to her people, right? You mentioned one of my favorites earlier, Martin Luther King. You don't have to be Martin Luther King to touch people's hearts, to inspire people. You don't need a grand speech all the time.
No.
And I'd argue that most of his work was, roll up your sleeves on the ground, not the speeches. The speeches are what we remember today.
Yep.
But people forget the hard work that he did. But anyway, when I asked her that, she just said, well, all I'm doing is calling people. I said, oh, okay. What are you saying? And this was so cool because, a lot of people were calling, a lot of people were making those calls a day. Are you getting your work done? You got that? No, all she asked was, are you okay?
Yeah.
Can I help? You see? Now that goes right to someone's heart. And how simple was that, right?
Yeah.
Now the key, and this is what we ask in our workshops all the time, that the hard work is, how do you take something like that And remember, I mentioned discipline. How do you take something like that and embed it in your practice as a leader every single day, right? And there are all kinds of things like that. Now, unfortunately, this is why I bristle at the word manager sometimes. Admiral Grace Hopper, she said, management's about things, leadership is about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Management is important. Don't get me wrong. It's critically important. We've got to take care of business. But, what has the higher priority? Your people. Now, we forget that in the midst of a busy day, right? Emergencies come, priorities seem to want to displace these things. You can't, that's why the word discipline is so important. We can't let these emergencies and technical things get in the way. They're important, don't get me wrong. But if we're not taking care, in fact, I was speaking in Cleveland a couple months ago. It was for construction financial managers.
Okay.
And their journal, I couldn't have hoped for a better setup. I'm reading their journal before I went on, and there was an article this guy had written, one of their leaders had written, and it was about prioritizing people. It was called put your people first.
Okay.
And in it, he said, I didn't always do that. I learned I needed to put people first, because at one point I had a whole yard full of equipment and nobody to run it. And one of the greatest challenges today is keep attracting and keeping good people. And so there it is. That's what happens if you don't put your people first. And believe me, we do in workshops spend a couple hours isolating all the ways if we don't take care of these disciplines, these seemingly so simple things, inspire, empower, guide. If we don't take care of these things, the damage can be severe and can be immediate, so.
Jim, tell me how you landed on the human-centric approach.
Well,
that's as an important, like it's certain underlying with and everything that you've said up to this point, that human-centered piece is there.
Yeah.
But that you made that a focus. You really have.
Yeah, I wish I coined that, but it's been a word that's been kicking around in academic leadership for quite a while, right? Mm-hmm. And we really landed on it because it's always been what I've been talking about, right?
Yes. But
when we were brand forward with the Sensei leader, we realized that sometimes people didn't realize what that was, right? They weren't making the connection. They thought I was going to come in and break boards and stuff like that. So we had some good help.
You don't break boards?
Not anymore. I like to play guitar. Now look at these hands. I've broken enough boards and people's heads and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a whole other story. No, to get back to it, it's what we've always done. It's at the heart of what a sensei does. It's what the heart of the martial arts journey. So it was a very natural transition. And we had some mentors recently, last couple of years, who said, put that forward and more people will open up to it. I have to explain now because people sometimes will call and they say, well, you're still doing the sensei thing. Oh yeah. Once I get there, don't worry. That's what it is. It hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. It's just these words are a little more accessible. And thankfully, the academics are coming around to it. You pick up HBR, Wall Street Journal, Gallup, all these things. They're really highlighting, a couple of years ago, you search human-centric leadership, you see nothing.
Yeah.
Google search it now, right? And it's all over the place. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. Well, we were pulling the cart a while ago.
Lovely. Beautiful. No, there is value in that and recognizing that. And again, people get caught up in titles and positions, and in the grand scheme of things, they don't mean much at all. Maybe that's a way of distinguishing, who does what job.
Yeah, it's how we organize, right?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's we're all kind of in this together, so to speak, because we're should, and I don't know, often I like using the word should, but we should be moving towards that common direction. And that should be the focus, as opposed to where my parking spot is, or what corner office I got, or what's on my business card. Those things aren't the focus. They're not, and they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be. No, they are. Sadly, they are to some people. And it's weird because I'm a pretty judgmental guy, and I've had to learn how to pull back my judgment sometimes.
Okay.
And I've been in organizations where, on paper, financially, they may be very strong, at least right now. But I'd say this, one of the things I keep saying these days is, God, I hate when people say one of the things I kept saying, but the age of command and control is over. Yeah. If it ever was effective, it's certainly over these days. And companies that and leaders that still embrace that idea, they're either dead or they're dying. Now, it can take generations for an organization to die, right? And I have been in places where people say, "Hey, we're doing fine. Look at our financials. We're kicking butt," you know. And that's okay, fine. Show me your churn rate. Are people staying with you? You know, because that's one of the early indicators. That's one of the canaries in the cave, so to speak, where if you can't keep people, if you can't keep good people, you're constantly in a state of retraining, and that's draining resources. And sometimes that can go hidden for a while. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it can be very hidden because the bottom line may be still very strong, right? So you got to look at those things and anticipate, on the horizon. That's one of your best indicators. And I think that's going to become more and more crucial as we go forward, especially into this age of AI. But the other thing too is, remember, when we put people out of work for whatever reason, however legitimate it might be, remember, it's not just people who are working, I hate the word, but for us, but these are people in our community. These are all also the people who are buying the things that we're trying to make and sell, right?
Yep.
So that's where we're reaching a pretty critical state here that we've got to really, really pay attention to.
A piece of this has been clear to me that you think is truly important, and I would agree with you, is the component of sharing, and how important it is that leaders share, because sharing is a part of what the leadership framework is. I don't know if you could maybe explain or expand on it a bit further for our audience.
You did your homework. I'm impressed. I knew as soon as we started talking, I knew we were kindred spirits. But
we were great.
No, that's refreshing, because a lot of folks don't take the time to even look at the surface. The whole sharing component. I mean, that came out of doing interviews like this, and people started asking. One of the common questions, especially on legacy media, where you only have a couple minutes to compress everything, right? They'd say, okay, if you can summarize all this in one thought, what would it be? And the more I thought about it, it always came to sharing. Leadership is sharing. A leader shares. The rest of the conversation, all the work that we do, really is comprised of what? It's what are we willing to share and how? Now, to bring that down to earth for just a second, think about the most crucial, and this, again, if we were in a workshop right now, I'd be asking you the question. I'd say, what are you willing to share as a leader? What are you willing to share?
Right.
And I'll ask you that. What would you be willing? What are you willing to share as a leader?
As a leader, I think it's very important to share our experiences.
That's a good one,
in fact, take the leadership, strip away the title of leadership. I think as individuals, it's extremely important to share our experiences, because we can inspire. So, as an example, you're going through something challenging, right? It's super easy in the world to think no one on the planet has any idea this challenging, painful, difficult, hard thing you're going through has any idea what that's like, right? And imagine for a moment if you hear someone goes, "Oh yeah, I've done that, and here's how I got through it." Like, how inspiring is that? And so sharing has the ability to empower people, give hope. Again, the motivation I get, there's so much that comes with that. So I would say, that the first thing that comes to mind for me.
What are you doing in a couple weeks? I'll take you to the next workshop in New Mexico.
I'm there.
Yeah, because that's exactly, that's it. And you touched on the sharing experience, and it's informative that you went to, instead of just sharing your positive experiences, obviously you're talking about sharing mistakes and sharing hardship too, which is a key. Sharing, being vulnerable and exposing uncertainty have been identified by academics now. Again, senseis knew it, because I quote Lao Tzu from 2,000 years ago, and he's saying the same thing. All these people are saying the same thing. We have to revisit it from time to time. That's part of what discipline is. But at any rate, the vulnerability and the uncertainty are two markers of effective leaders. And yet people are, leaders are still kind of hesitant. Now, it doesn't mean you come out and go, "Oh my God, my life sucks." But people don't want to hear that, right?
No.
But to share the challenges that are in front of you. Now I'm going to cut to the chase.
Can I just add something? Sorry, jump in. I think on the sharing, and I probably should have said earlier too, is that so for you can share your story, right? So I've gone through this tragic thing, but it's not important just to talk about the tragic thing that happened, because that's not where the story ended.
Right.
The story didn't end at the tragedy, the end. It's what you did to overcome it afterwards. How did you survive it? What steps did you take? Who did you talk to? What resources did you have to introduce to help you? Like those are the parts of those tragic stories that we tell that can help others. So that's now a choice thing, right? Because I can choose to tell the story and end of the tragedy, or take it 2 or 3 steps further and help others. And so I think that's an important distinction to be made when we talk about sharing our stories.
Sure. And I'll expand on it only a little bit sideways with that, because sometimes the story is still going on, right? And let's say an organization is facing some challenges. Isn't it better to share those challenges and then open it up and say, okay, what do we do? Here I've had something I think maybe was a similar experience. Here's what I did then, but I don't know if it's going to work now. These are the types of things that really, really open us up to people. But two of the things that come up all the time, two of the things that leaders are very hesitant to share, are power and authority. And yet those are two of the most incredible things you can share. Power, let's make sure we define it, because people confuse power with control too much. And that's where that term comes from. Does power corrupt? Does it corrupt?
Right.
Well, not if we use the philosophical definition properly. Power is nothing more than your ability or capacity to work, to perform effectively, to get something done. That's what power is, in a human-centric sense. All right. In physics, power is defined as the work you do, right? Those are very useful definitions. How do you become more powerful? How do you get more done? There's only one way: by sharing. If you make empower, we're back to that word again. See how practical it is? These are not just pretty words. When I help the people around me become more powerful, then I can get more done. And, that's crucial as a leader, because you're not doing it alone. We have another word for that. And it's another A word. It's not audacious. Starts with an A, ends with an E. People have all the answers. People that think they can do everything themselves, we call them that word, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we don't want to get around them. And the authority, the autonomy. Like I said earlier, people perform at their best when they have the chance to learn, to grow, to develop, when their work has meaning, right?
Yeah.
When they have some control over their own life and their own destiny, and they want to feel that they're making a contribution. So we've got to be willing to share these things. Now, I understand there's trepidation sometimes. Oh my God, if I do this, I trust this person with this.
Yep.
Hey, they might you brought up the word earlier, they might make a mistake. So you might too, right? And we have to encourage positive mistakes. Then we look to an example like someone like Elon Musk, right? Who he encourages his design teams and his creative teams to be audacious, doesn't he?
Yes.
And he knows they're going to, and his whole philosophy is get the mistakes out of the way fast.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Make the mistakes, correct them, keep going, bang, bang, bang. It kind of reminds me of old football coach I had. Right? Yeah. So
no, you're right though. I think there's value in those mistakes that we make, and
well, you're gonna make them. There's no way around.
Well, yeah,
and you
almost you almost kind of want to embrace them, like look for them, and because that's where you see the opportunities for growth and development, and that's really ultimately when we talk about what a leader can do for people and the people that they're there to serve. And I'll use that term, there to serve. Some that might throw some people off, but leaders are there to serve the people, and one of those ways is helping them to grow, to empower them and transform them into better than what they were.
Yeah, and you're hitting on something deep now, because now let's talk about one of the huge challenges in leadership today is filling the succession gap. And it's painful. It's painful sometimes when I'm working in with a group of people, and especially, it's not always younger in terms of age, but also experience, but who have to step in and fill a void, but they're not prepared. They don't feel prepared, right? And why not? Well, because they haven't been exposed to these things. And again, I'm not trying to soften the word. I don't want to soften the word. Mistakes are mistakes. But the point is, we could redefine that a little bit. Like say, you have to have audacity. You have to go out there and do something. You have to try it. The biggest mistake is not trying anything. Now, it might work. It might not work. Okay. Let's rephrase that. We might not get the expected outcome, right? But that doesn't mean it's a mistake in the classic sense of the term. It's just we tried something, it didn't work. Let's learn from it, move along, and keep going. So and these terms are important to define, especially as a leader. It's important to define these terms with your team, because you look at now. Let's look at catastrophic failures in an organization, or it's funny. Sports is a cool metaphor because you see the results right away, right?
Yeah.
So you look at now it's playoff time. So and this always annoys the hell out of me anyway. But you see these teams achieve the national championships going on in football now, right? And a team gets to this level. You think of how many teams there are out there competing to get those 12 slots, right?
Yep.
And then as soon as the team loses, everybody's jumping on them. Oh, they suck. They didn't. No. You know how much they had to do right to get there, right? There's nothing wrong with a bronze medal.
No.
That's way better than most.
You didn't fail.
Yeah, you didn't fail. So on the other hand, I don't like good losers either. We all want to be on the top, right? But it's an interesting thing. These are the people that we see them make mistakes. You see it obviously. Now look at the mirror. Look in the mirror. What mistakes are you willing to make? What chances are you willing to take? And right now we're talking about, I talk about courage a lot. I could easily substitute the word audacity in there. Absolutely. And say, how do we get these young people to be better leaders? Well, we have to expose them to risk and danger, because there is no audacity. There is no courage without the risk and the danger, right?
Yes.
The risk and the danger define the audacity. They define the courage. And the only way we can strengthen that muscle, so to speak, is by exposing it. So we got to expose people to it. That's part of the training.
Yep. As scary as that may be and nerve-wracking for people that it is a necessary part of the journey that if we truly are looking to grow, develop, and get better.
I'd rather be scared than bored.
That's a nice option. Yeah. I'm with you. It keeps it exciting, man. It keeps it exciting.
Yeah.
And then
it's funny because people have challenged me on that a lot. People challenge me on the word self-confidence. That gets confused with courage a lot. You know what I mean? And they say, geez, you look so confident. I said, no, believe me, drug addicts are not self-confident people. And that's still the greatest challenge I have in my life. And people are surprised when they say that, because I suppose to a lot of people, I may come across as being confident.
Sure.
Well, one thing I learned is my confidence is not based on a surety of an outcome. I don't know what's I might be the only boxer in the world who ever walked. My friends would say, you going to win? I said, I don't know. But I didn't know what the other guy was bringing. Here's what I learned. Right. My confidence was based on my preparation.
Nice.
Did I do everything I could do to be in that ring?
Right.
I was 33 when I started boxing. How's that for stupid? I was making up for lost time. I had no illusions of being a champion or anything. I wanted that experience because I had lost out on so much through my drug use, right?
Gotcha.
So, when I got there, that was my purpose. And I knew, I was fighting guys a lot younger than me, that were natural athletes and stuff. And I just, if they beat me, fine. But they were going to know they were at a party.
It wasn't going to be an easy one.
Yeah, I was going to work at least as hard, if not harder than they would. That's the whole key right there, right? Now, if you base your confidence on your preparation, I think that's how we have the ability to be resilient. Not 7 times get up 8, so.
And there's much to be said about not tying to the outcome of what you want to have happen, right? Like
you don't know,
because you can't control that. It's not in your control at all. And and I think sports is a great example because there's so many illustrations. I'm a basketball guy, and you see that over and over again where you get to the line and you have a chance to hit that game-winning free throw that you've practiced a million times before as a kid in the driveway. Like everyone has done that, or wherever in the park where they said the game's on the line, 3, 2, 1. We've all practiced that, but that doesn't guarantee that when a moment actually arrives, you'll get the outcome you want.
Yeah, and then how do you respond back to it? Is it like these people that have short memories? I was a safety and a kicker in football, and a kicker especially, man, you got to forget it. You missed it, you got to forget it. You got another one coming. But it was weird. I hated golf for most of my life. I thought I couldn't imagine a stupider thing to do than to play golf. And then somehow, a long story, but somebody got me to try it, and I got hooked. And the result of that was I went to this tournament. It was LPGA seniors. So it was these women who had been on the pro tour and now they're semi-retired. So they're out there like the Champions Tour, And it was cool because the crowds weren't really huge. And this one woman, Dottie Wild West, she had been a champion many times over. She skinned one over the green. It ended up in the rough. And she's walking over to play her shot. And after she made her shot, I said, look, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but kind of feels good to see you guys do that once in a while too. And we ended up being able to walk to the next tee. And she was so cool. She was so cool. And she said, this is the problem. I think most of you guys, you amateur golfers, you expect every shot to be good. She said, no, it's not that I don't get angry. I do. She said, but we expect bad shots. It's going to happen. The mindset is, what do I do with that? How do I play it from here? Right. That's a good lesson. I think that we can all take away.
It reminds me, again, as a basketball guy, I believe it was in 1992, NBA Finals, the Orlando Magic and Houston Rockets, these are in the finals for competing for a championship.
Yeah.
And it was in game one of the series. And, Nick Anderson was a guard for the Magic, longtime guard, staple, solid player his whole career. He had an opportunity to ice the game. There was a one possession game, and he was fouled at the free throw line, a chance. All he had to do was hit one of the two. One of the two, the game was theirs. It was because they make it a two possession game.
Yeah.
He missed the first one. Everyone's panicked. Everyone's tense. He goes to the line. He misses the second one. The ball goes up in the air in a mad scramble. It comes back in his hands, and he's fouled again. So now it's the exact same scenario, but a lot less time now.
Yeah.
And nothing has changed. He goes back to the line. Again, reliable player, misses the first one. Steps up again, misses the second one. Houston comes down, hits a three-pointer, ties the game, puts it in overtime. They win in overtime, and that game determined the rest of the series where Houston eventually won. And I remember years later having an opportunity. I actually had an opportunity to interview Nick Anderson, and you cannot talk about that. And in some respect, I kind of felt bad because I'm sure he's been asked about it 1,000,001 times. Yeah. And he maybe because he had a lot of practice in responding, but he just said, "Hey, listen." There's no doubt, there's no question in my mind that I tried. I made every reasonable attempt that I could. Yeah. I did not go there to miss 4 free throws. I tried. And sometimes it doesn't work out the way you want, no matter how bad. Your will cannot force outcomes. And there's so many lessons to be taken from that, and so many things that you can walk away and say, okay, you can control what I can control, which is my effort. And that's exactly what he talked about, what he did, and what we've been alluding to as well.
And we've got to be very careful not to define, can't define ourselves and our teams by the moment. You know what I mean? Because how many times did he do something that was difficult that got them in that position in the first place, right?
That's right. That's right.
One of the iconic ones, like Scott Norwood, I've heard him talk a couple of times. Wide right, when he missed that kick for the Buffalo Bills and the Giants won the Super Bowl that year. And what was very interesting is his whole team rallied around him. And I had a similar experience too. I remember missing a field goal that I thought I lost the game. And, and the guys and the coach, they come to, no, you know what? We lost that game in the first quarter. There were how many other plays? It's not just that one. Yes. But when you're in the pressure, that last, like sports gives us that, it's at the buzzer, right? And the free throw doesn't go. Well, that's the one we remember.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I'm harping on that is because I think as leaders, we do that too. And we've got to be careful about that. And especially how many times, and I think it happens in public life more than in private life, but how many times do you see a leader in particular at a certain level make a mistake and everybody wants to chop their heads off, right? Let's get rid of this guy. Let's get rid of this guy. Well, wait a minute. Maybe that's the right thing to do, but let's look at the totality of it, right? Has this person been effective? Has this person been genuinely a good leader? Have they been an effective leader? And now we're going to cut them over this moment. Be very careful about that. And I think too often we rush to judgment that way. So yeah, we have to look at things in the totality, not just in the moment.
That sounds like a very human-centered approach there. I love it. I love staying on brand. I love it.
Once in a while, things work out. Yeah,
that's it. For our listeners, you've got a couple books out there. Can we maybe let them know where they are and what they are? I mean, you said the Sensei Leader was one, and you've got two others, correct?
Yeah, IEG is one that we've been trotting out lately. This is I think I have
Inspire, Empower Guide.
Inspire, Empower Guide. Yeah,
got it.
Named it a little more technically, but yeah, just come to. Well, I'm trying to drive people to the Keep It Human network right now, and
Okay.
just do that. keepithuman.network. Come there. There's a free forever level that you can start with, get involved with, and or if you more directly want to just get me to come and speak at your conference or your organization, then the human-centric leader.org is the best way to get to us.
Amazing. Jim, this has been awesome, man. I tell you, I've enjoyed the conversation. As you said, kindred spirits, and I very much appreciate, again, just the focus on that human side of things. I know we didn't talk much about even emotional intelligence. That fits into this in a really, really big way. And empathy, you alluded to that, and resilience. These are all parts of what makes that human experience as human as it is, and why it needs to maintain. So thank you for that.
Let's make this the first conversation, not the last. And I'd love to invite you on the Keep It Human program too.
I'm there. You say when. I'm there. I got to be awesome. Be well, Jim. All the best.
Thank you.
Cool. Let me just press stop. How'd we do?
I was going to ask you that.
Back, we are here on the podcast, and much appreciation. Thank goes out to Jim. During our conversation, he emphasized the importance of embracing vulnerability and viewing mistakes as valuable learning experiences. He shared how effective leaders inspire their teams by fostering a culture of trust and openness, where every individual feels empowered to grow and take risks. I particularly love Jim's perspective on how leaders can create a sense of purpose in their teams, ultimately leading to a greater engagement and fulfillment. I certainly encourage you to connect with Jim directly to learn more about his work and his insights. You can find his contact details in the show notes below, as always, as well as links to his website and his social media handles. Additionally, Jim has some exciting resources available, including a free membership to his Keep It Human network, which provides valuable tools and insights for leaders looking to enhance their impact. Be sure to check out, again, all that in the show notes below. And I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share this podcast if you haven't already done so. Of course, this helps us continue to grow and reach even more listeners. Remember, living your best audacious life is just a decision away. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.